Welcome to Brandon Hall Group's Excellence at Work podcast. You will hear from industry leaders covering innovative, cutting-edge business, learning, and HR topics that weave current market research and technology into each episode. Our Excellence at Work podcast is hosted by Brandon Hall Group's Chief Operating Officer and Principal HCM Analyst, Rachel Cook.
Hi, and thank you for tuning in to Brandon Hall Group's Excellence at Work podcast. Don't forget to subscribe. Today, we are going to be talking about learning strategies to make organizations change ready. And with me, I would love to warmly welcome Morné Swart, the Vice President of Global Product Strategy and Transformation of SumTotal Systems. Hi, Morné. How are you?
Hi, Rachel. I'm doing well, thank you.
Fantastic. And just to share with our listeners and viewers today a little bit about who you are and your responsibilities at SumTotal. You are in charge for leading innovation and driving product strategy. You have done this for more than 20 years and have great experience in enterprise-wide HR technology products and services. Morné has a passion for building higher performing organizations by optimizing the effectiveness of people, process, information, and technology. Again, welcome, and I'm looking forward to our discussion today. I think it's an exciting discussion that we're having, and a much needed discussion around engaging and aligning employees with organizations in a much more effective and productive way.
Yeah, completely agree. I think it's especially important today if we look on, at the trends and what's happening in the market.
Absolutely, and SumTotal is is a pioneer of learning and talent technology and helping organizations drive measurable results. And so you have a lot of great examples, and I've also been a Brandon Hall Group Excellence Award winner year after year. Congratulations there too. I want to recognize you for your achievements and major achievements, for some of your best practices. And again, I'm excited about what we're talking about today because it's a fresh, I think, perspective on how organizations and leaders should look or should focus, and also what it means for the employees. So, why don't you, Morné, if you can, please, kind of share your perspective of what you're seeing in the current state of the market and the state of the nation and how, what learning talent looks like.
Sure. Thank you, Rachel. And we love partnering with Brandon Hall. I mean, your thought leadership in the market, is definitely, the best, in our opinion, on just to keep, awareness of what's happening around us. And as we reflect on what we're seeing, and certainly if we look at what you have published out there, there's both an opportunity for us, to align an outcome for our employers as well as our employees. I feel that there are four kind of core themes that could help us, take advantage of this opportunity for both. Of course, first being the workforce. As we look around what is happening now, there's definitely an emphasis on skills and acquiring those skills within organizations. That has taken on a form of need by being balanced with a flexibility in work options for those individuals who have those skills that you're looking to employ. In addition to that, if we're focusing on the workforce pillar for now, those skills and the desire for those skills to continue to develop is one that we see are probably at the heightened level right now of expectation, as well as the opportunities for career growth, and the employees really looking at how we could help them, how employers could help them to grow. Whether it's the current role, whether it's an adjacent role, that's really one area of the four that we see, a lot of emphasis on. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say I agree, and it was interesting as we kind of looked at some of the research we were discussing a few years back around employee value proposition and how we, the drivers behind kind of how to build that or bridge that gap between the employer and the employee, and how we kind of build that infrastructure from across all the different talent pillars that that helps leaders be better leaders, helps also recruit the type of people that align to the culture of the organization, and also ensuring that their vision, the leader's vision, aligns to the brand of their organization. So it's a very fluid process, and I love kind of your thinking around it as well. Morne, can you expand on that?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the publications you had a couple of years ago was around the EVP framework. I think you had a high performance EVP framework that you put in place. And the key question as we focus on the workforce was, what will employees say they value about the organization, right? And you divided it into, I think it was three core categories, right? Opportunity and growth, alignment and results, collaboration and innovation. And an example of what an employee would say about opportunity and growth is, I value this organization because it engaged me in a meaningful workplace, right? One of the areas that I see that creates this balance that we're looking for, because on the flip side of that, the organization also wants to point at the employee and say, we value this employee because they represent these values to our organization. Now, how do we connect those two aspects, right? We just spoke about the workforce pillar saying, we want development opportunities, career growth opportunities, flexible work options. If you want this skill, we got to talk about how and what I see, as an employer offering me to be able to develop those, and I will bring my skills to you. At the same time, I believe that the connection that we can make between the employer and the employee is one of culture, where you truly align on purpose. To your point, Rachel, that alignment is so critical. Organizations should lead with purpose, because it will attract those individuals that align to your purpose. And if, there are three core elements for successful engagement, kind of like a recipe for success. The first one of those is purpose. Knowing what you are coming to work for and what the purpose is that you are providing. The second one is mastery of your skill, right? Of your role, having the knowledge, ability, and skill set to execute. So if I come to work and I know, and I'm a master of my craft, I know exactly what I'm doing, I feel really good at doing it, I'm happy in doing it, I'm passionate about doing it, those are two excellent components that align you to the organization and engage you. And the third one is autonomy. So, once you know your purpose and you have the knowledge of executing to that purpose, and you can do that autonomously without somebody, looking over your shoulder all the time, that really creates an incredible engagement profile for an individual. And then if you can connect that, to the culture of the organization, their mission, their vision, what they stand for, and if people, align properly to that execution of their role within the organization, you've got a perfect combination for success. And that's really, what the EVP is looking for or looking at, is to say, we're going to be more successful as an organization if we can align both the value to the employee and the value to the employer. And in your study, you've actually, illustrated very successful returns in both engagement in employees and also execution of their goals, if you can get that alignment correct. So that's just two of the four that I'd like to touch on at the moment, and I can cover the other two. I'll give you a moment to comment.
Yes, Morne. You framed up the study well and kind of articulated the three overarching areas and how they also, from an employee perspective and from an employer perspective, and then what we can do as an organization or as a leader, how we attract the right talent, how do we engage the talent, and how do we retain the talent, and and how does this help drive greater business results? And in return, because I think over the last year, and I don't want to, and we talked about this too, it's a lot about the employee, which the employee is very important, obviously. However, it just can't be only about the employee, no matter what kind of economy that we're in, if the employee is not aligning to the business needs, because we can't have a business without the proper alignment of both expectations. Just like you can't have an employer just can't be thinking about the employer and not the employee, and the employee can't just be thinking about the employee and not the employer. So we got to figure out kind of that happy medium between the two, where we can all be more cohesive and and cohabitating in this environment where we're all kind of in it for the right reasons.
That's right, and we often see a pendulum swing, right?
Sure.
It's like one way or the other way, and what we're trying to create through this is a balance, because the balance results in retention and then results in attracting new employees to that because of the retention. I mean, loyalty is something people forgot about, right? I've been at this organization for, I think, 23 years now. I mean, people used to get a watch or a plaque or whatever. Today, people ask me, "What's wrong with you? Why are you staying at the organization?" But really, I mean, if I look at what our mission and our vision is, we truly want individuals to be the best reflection of themselves, and as a result, help their employers drive the same value to market. There were two other components that I think I want to cover on the state of the market. Then we can maybe just tie it together with how this is evolving and how technology can really be an enabler here, and what we're doing. The third one is that we see is really important is adopting, adaptation, or finding an ability for employees to elect to use technologies that can improve their execution and alignment, right? And in order to create that elective participation, meaning getting people to leverage technologies that we know could help in this case, but getting them to use it and come back to it out of their own free will is easier said than done. And we also see organizations today, if we look at the state of market, they looking to simplify at the same time their ecosystems and move away from the complexity of multiple vendors and roadmaps and experiences, and just simplify it, and therefore create a single experience, beautiful personal experience for individuals to come in and feel comfortable in using that technology that ultimately results in a meaningful outcome for them. Because typically when you implement these technologies, there are certain, let's say, objectives or goals or things that are already, in place, that are being facilitated through this technology. And so the employer oftentimes, create those programs. And then it's important for the employee, again, in this balance, to find that those programs are actually meaningful and that it's valuable for them to leverage these technologies to successfully execute. And then lastly, we are doing this, and ultimately organizations are looking to bring these things together to ultimately sustain themselves in the market, right? Perhaps even become an employer of choice. We spoke about digital maturity for a long time, and digitization and digitalization in the digital workplace, meaning converting what was otherwise on Word documents, electronically convert those, and connecting people to be able to leverage those technologies electronically in a much more efficient manner. That creates a digital workplace, which leads to being digitally mature. And of course, through COVID, we found that organizations that were ready for those did extremely well, and weren't caught flat-footed with all the changes that needed to happen. But ultimately, there is this dynamic between people, process, and technology, and I am very passionate about that. And I'll step in. I'll give you a second to reflect on this, and then I'll step into I think what would make sense to why all three of those really matter in light of what we're doing.
Yes, those are some really good points that you made around, especially the importance of technology. However, focusing on the people and your process first, and having that alignment. And something just kind of we talked a bit, kind of just popped into my mind here around employee engagement. And as we were looking at the study, and we were kind of refining the EVP framework and thinking about employee engagement. And oftentimes, I think companies, when they don't have a really good framework for EVP, or they haven't focused on EVP, they feel that by focusing on just engagement, that's enough, and that's part of it. But I think if we can help companies figure out, kind of differentiate, how they use the employee engagement, what they do for employee engagement, and how that kind of dovetails into their EVP, and and take a deeper dive across, not just the engagement, but the outcomes and the other pillars of EVP. How would you kind of categorize, or how would you help companies if they think that they have engagement and their engagement is potentially maybe pretty good? Do you think that's enough?
I think, to your point, it's definitely important, but it's certainly not to the level where it satisfies the complete kind of dynamic around that. Um, if we look at the if we look at the dynamic between productivity and technology change, so if we look at rate of change and we look at time, so rate of change would be on the y, and time would be on x. So if you look at rate of change of technology over the last few months, just skyrocketed. But productivity has not
Mm-hmm.
gone up by more than 2.8% over the last few years. The gap that we have in business performance is not necessarily just engagement, because people have been engaged during the time that technology has changed, but our productivity hasn't really
Mm-hmm.
moved up at the same level of change as technology. So if we dive a little bit deeper into what that difference is, we'll see that there are components that make up those that gap. And those components are things like public policy, business and security, people, and then only technology. So when we talk about people, technology, and process, we're there's an element there between technology and people, and then the process. sits a little bit outside of that. Those are things that are more difficult to change. And so what we can do through our tools today is to say, look, how can we optimize? How can we help close the gap among technology, individuals, business, society, and governments? How can you take that policy and business process and close and shrink the gap and bring people up to proficiency of technology quickly? And it can be done. If you think of companies, the world's largest technology companies, we buy from them every day online. We buy cars from the biggest electronic car manufacturers in the world. There are companies that have been successful in connecting their people process with the technology. So around individuals, knowledge is, like we said, knowledge is critical. Ensure that engagement is critical. The tool set is really important to have them use that tool set, but then tying together the elements of business process and essentially educating the individuals to that business process so that they can more efficiently either influence it, innovate with it, and grow with that innovation. That will close the gap to technology because they'll get digitally more mature, but they'll bring the business along with it in order to close that gap in performance that we are seeing right now in the market.
And by doing that, the change management, that communication piece, as you mentioned, and as we have it in our framework, it's so critical because as you're kind of focusing on some of these are maybe perhaps, I wouldn't say separate from each other, but there are certain areas that you cannot be working on at the same time. However, how they integrate with each other and how you communicate kind of the family overall, how it works, that's important. And then, if you do see productions down, why is it down? Or do you see a high turnover in your recent hires? Is it, whatever reasons, that's what you got to constantly be looking at that data and then tying it into the value of your EVP strategy. And, recently I was also on a workshop with one of our clients around purpose. Purpose is coming up quite a bit for both the companies, but also individual purpose. So, having a program or some type of initiative to help companies define their purpose, or I'm sorry, help employees, help them define their purpose and making sure that purpose aligns with the work that they're doing. And that the company has a purpose. So I think that's all, very critical in this kind of very fluid, world that we live in.
Such a good point because, and I think one that's important is we got to look across the life cycle of an employee within an organization. And I think too often, you assess or engage with an employee in a specific manner that may not be connected to a time in their life cycle where you could universally provide guidance. And I'll give it for instance. Typically, if you look at technology, learning traditionally was, assigned to somebody once they've been in their job, once they've been onboarded, maybe past their first 100 days, they get, you're required to take this and so forth. And we looked at this and said, there really needs to be guidance to the employee and coaching and mentoring and support during onboarding, even in a pre-hire phase, where learning can play a very important role in that life cycle. If I'm applying for a role within an organization, am I just going online and filling out a form and kind of submitting my resume and I read through, or is there this beautiful infographic or welcome video that's telling me about the wonderful things we are doing as an organization, whether it's ESG related activities or just things that we are doing that we're proud of as an organization. That has an influence on pre-hires. um, we find that today. I was talking to someone about a statistic that 20% of individuals leave their organization within the first 45 days after being hired. And if you look at why, it's just that there's a disconnect between the brand they saw and the experience they're having within that period. And so what we can do with technology is we can provide information, guidance, coaching, mentoring during that process, from pre-boarding, to pre-hire, to being hired, to being onboarded, and really, prepare the individual for the organization they're working at. So that is very important if we look at how we can enable technology to support the life cycle of the employee, to create that balance again, with they appreciate what the company is doing for them, but they're getting meaningful value during that process.
That's so important, because the last thing you want to do is spend all this time and investment on a new employee or new employees, and especially at the rate that some companies onboard, whether it's 30,000 new employees a quarter, or 60,000 for the year, and some of these really large global organizations, and you have 20% of that's not coming back or not lasting longer than a month or 30 days or 60. That's such a waste of time, money, and
Absolutely.
just potential.
Yeah.
So, it's really, and it's not because these people that come into the organization, they could be very talented. However, there's some disconnect in the process of recruiting them, educating them, communicating with them. And also, maybe some of them are still wrong for the organization. So, you have to kind of figure out where the disconnect is and how you could do, or how we can do a better job as leaders and HR professionals.
And I think this is one area where, again, the Brandon Hall EVP framework is so important, because you talk about alignment and results, right? And where you are, setting goals, the individual understands what they're signing up for, what the objective is. There's transparent communication through that process, but it then balances it out with opportunity and growth on the other side. And it brings it together through collaboration and innovation, where people share best practices, they work together, there's teamwork, there's diversity and inclusion. There are all these things that you could really balance out. So I am truly excited about the opportunity for organizations to look at what's happening in the market. This gap that we spoke of between the performance, that graph that we want to grow, as much as we can connect it to technology, leveraging the tools that are out there, and creating the leveraging in a manner where it's meaningful to the employees, so they come back and use it, so we can finally get to this alignment and results, and they've got opportunities for growth, and they work together. That creates a real culture of excellence. And, I feel we have a roadmap that we could guide employees and employers to take advantage of that.
Absolutely, and I like building a roadmap of excellence. Thinking from in the mindset of excellence. How do we get there, or how do we continue to be in that state? Because as you mentioned, it's a pendulum. Things shift, and it's just the nature of our world. So you can't control it. You just kind of have to adapt to it and try to stay on top of the pendulum as much as possible. And then when you're in the low spectrum of it, figure out how to get out of there quickly.
Yes, no, for sure.
And before we wrap up, this is a very big, complex I think, as you look at EVP, it can be very complex and kind of hard, I think, for companies to figure it out or to kind of focus on it, because there's a lot of different pieces. But we've seen, through, some of the high performing organizations that do focus on it, how, how important, and how the impact that they have, how it drives performance and all the different areas that we discuss. What's your advice as far as, where should companies begin? And if they are somewhat focused on it, how can they continue? Or what's some,
Sure.
kind of final thoughts that you want to wrap up here with?
So, so one of the things that we have done is we've worked with thousands of organizations to develop something we call an organizational maturity index. And the organizational maturity index is actually like a survey that you take, and it focuses on 9 different indicators of maturity within an organization, whether that is governance, HR's role and people strategy, whether it's a people-centric culture, is there funding, governance, is there an infrastructure? So it measures all these components within an organization that allow you to form an opinion of where you are. Just like, how ready are we to take on what we're talking about here? Because ultimately, in order to achieve that balance in the EVP, we spoke about, having alignment and collaboration and, the growth and opportunity. You need technology to facilitate that. And in order to understand kind of where you are you ready for that technology? Are you ready to blend a talent strategy and a learning strategy, and assess people's potential and then develop their capabilities to match that? There are tools out there, and we're happy to provide a link to our viewers here, of course, to that. And of course, you have tremendous, material as well on just establishing your level of maturity, so that you can absorb it at the pace and the scale that is manageable to your organization. But there are definitely tools out there for people to just find a survey. And the survey doesn't just provide you with this is where you are. It provides guidance as to what should your next step be. So I would really advise the viewers to engage in such a survey and find out where they are in that spectrum.
Yes, definitely assess where you are, and to use that data to help you build your focus is critical, and continue, don't, figure out what's the best timing for the survey and how you're going to use that data and build that in and integrate that with all of your different talent initiatives.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right, Morne, thank you. Thank you for sharing your perspective. And if this topic was interesting, it's something we haven't talked about recently enough. So I'm glad you kind of pushed us to really kind of revisit the EVP. So, I hope it's something. I think we're going to be taking a look at the survey again at some point this year to collect some additional insights, kind of where we are from where we left off a couple of years before the pandemic. So this is a perfect time as companies are evolving here. And, again, we feel that, as you do, Morne, how important it is. So thank you for sharing. And thank you to our viewers today. Thank you for listening in. And until next time, take care.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.